Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Hello, and welcome back to The Catholic Mama. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn, and thanks for joining us on this episode. And I say us because, hello. Husband.
Hello.
That's my husband, not a random man. And we have no kids in the house. So, of course, what do we do but podcast?
That's right. Why do anything else?
Why do anything else?
We sat and we thought all night, what do we want to do on a free night? Well, how about we do a podcast?
Free morning now. So we are very lucky that we moved about a minute and a half from Pat's dad and stepmother. And while that gave me some pause when we originally started planning all this, it's turned out to be wonderful. Yeah,
we were so sorry, just waking up, can't talk yet. We were concerned that it could turn into an Everybody Loves Raymond scenario, but we've actually discovered it's pretty much ideal because we are just we're in the same neighborhood as my dad, but we are just far enough away that it's a little too annoying to walk, but still too close that it's probably embarrassing to drive. So it all works out.
But we don't mind driving our kids over there to drop them off for a slumber party.
That's right. So that's good. Everyone gets along great. It's been a very nice move.
It has. And that also means that in the past 2 months, we've gotten 2 free nights, which is 2 more than we've ever gotten, really.
It makes a big difference. These nights are very refreshing. Love our children. Just give me a minute, friends. Give me a minute. Love our children. But it's good to have those nights out.
And they love it too.
They do, of course.
And we talked about our kids, we miss them and all that stuff. It's nice to... Anyway, so in our podcast, over the past few months, things keep coming up where businesses like to full-on either dabble or just full-on promote religious causes that, really go against the Catholic faith if you're actually living the Catholic faith. And it brings up the point of whether or not do we have some kind of moral obligation or a duty as Catholics to boycott or do something about these companies. Mm-hmm. So, we're going to spend some time talking about that because, if you try to boycott every single thing, you're going to be living in a box, and even the box is going to be from some place that
you're going to have
something.
A box with a Chick-fil-A sandwich in it,
and maybe something from Hobby Lobby to decorate it.
And there's your home.
A little pillow that says blessed.
And there's your home.
So, which is unreasonable. So, how do you decide and parse out which ones are actually worth boycotting? And
actually, that life doesn't sound all that bad.
Well, if it's a dry area, it's a dry climate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe Las Vegas or something, but then you have a whole other set of problems.
Doesn't sound all that bad.
Well, if it's a dry area, it's a dry climate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe Las Vegas or something, but then you have a whole other set of problems. Now, I grew up in a house where we are letter writers and boycotters, and you know that. Every time I come across something that annoyed me, I'm going to write a letter. And I don't know. I didn't always write a letter. I never wrote a letter to the city of Westchester.
Yeah, you threaten a lot.
I do. It comes down to it.
So, fill yourself with a bunch of hot air.
Thank you, honey. There's always letter writing. There's always letting companies know, besides, or other government entities, whatever, let them know that you don't like what they're doing, on top of voting with your wallet. So I think we should probably talk about voting with your wallet as well throughout this. But I'll be quiet and let you talk.
But the first thing I will say is, people think that this doesn't make a difference, but it absolutely does. Is there's a saying, the squeaky wheel always one way or another about these political issues, but especially when it comes to things like abortion. But the reason they kind of virtue signal more or less and champion these causes because the people who are promoting these causes are so loud and they have such a large platform that there's great social pressure for a lot of these, and then you'll see it, right? Like one corporation or whatever will kind of cave or move in that direction, and everybody else follows. So they're not like if they really care. I'm not saying that none of them care. There's probably various leaders in the positions of these corporations that do care. But I'm willing to bet, and we can see this in corporate culture all the time. It always follows the culture. It always follows the noise or the mob. So if you think that voicing your opinion or organizing boycotts or whatever doesn't matter, well, just look at how it does matter. Organizing boycotts or whatever doesn't matter. Well, just look at how it does matter from people who do it on positions that are completely opposed to what we would hold as Catholics, and you'll see that it can be quite effective.
Yeah, and I will say after many years of working in a large corporate retail company, it's a squeaky wheel inside of the company too. It's not so it's somebody is making a lot of noise outside the company. Somebody inside the company sees that. It relates to something that they believe. They start setting off
alarms.
Yeah, and suddenly in meetings,
we don't want to be behind the times,
right? And so in meetings, you hear, I think
we're
we should
do this. We're going to lose millennials,
right? Yeah,
right? Yeah.
And so even in companies, it starts off. It's not this company-wide decision to do these things or go in these certain directions. It usually is just a couple of people being loud in the corporation about this. So I would have meetings I sat in on. We're like, we should do something about this.
Correct.
Somebody posted on our Facebook page about this. We need to do something.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah,
they acquiesce.
Yeah, they don't really. They're not champions for these.
No,
causes.
I mean it's not to say again that people aren't, but
well, yeah, or at least they're not like real heroes in the sense that if they were, then like the pride flag wouldn't just be up in the month of June. It would be up all the time for people who care about these things. So, they pay their little, what they feel is their social obligation not to offend anybody. And then they quickly take it down and move on to, all right, what's the cause next month?
Right.
That will bring in a new group of customers. That's kind of the, unfortunate thing, but it is the nature of the game. And even behind that, I would say, even without thinking of corporations, I have a real hard time this morning. I'm sticking with corporations. Okay. Corporations this morning is culture at large, right? So making sure that you are being an activist at large for these causes that we care about. Things like religious freedom, things like pro-life activism, because the more these gain in culture, and statistically, pro-life is on the ascent. It's like we have reason to be optimistic and cheerful, and the more these just gain larger cultural acceptance, the more various companies will want to come in line with these particular political issues because they obviously see opportunity there, and that's really how markets work, right? Markets respond. That's what markets do is they respond. Sometimes they can, I'm not like a hardcore marketer political determinist. It sometimes works both ways. Some people say even in politics it's downstream of culture. I think it works both ways. Politics can affect culture. Culture affects politics. Same thing with markets. Corporations affect culture. Culture affects corporations. So it's not like you can do everything on your own, but these things, being an activist, voicing your opinion, voting certain ways, buying certain ways, they all do have effects. So it's worth talking about.
Right. And even if you think, it's just one vote or it's just a couple of dollars, what does it really matter? If you're living this and discussing it with others anyway, then it spreads and it's not just one. And even if it is, it's still one. It's still something. Mm-hmm. So some of the more flagrant.
Well, should we talk about the moral distinctions first from that article?
Yeah, sure. That's a good idea.
So you sent me this article. It was from Catholic.com. It was very good, and it was I think more of our idea for this episode is probably on the prudential level. When does it really make sense to maybe withhold money or boycott something? Whereas this article on Catholic.com, maybe you can link it in the show notes, actually looks at church teaching and tries to determine when do you actually have a moral obligation to boycott or not spend money with something. So there's a difference there. If you have a moral obligation, then you are ethically bound either to engage in something or not engage in something for worry of incurring moral guilt and shifting the disposition of your soul away from God. That's serious business, right? That's like don't violate 10 Commandments stuff. I'm not saying that these fall in the 10 Commandments, but there's a moral penalty if you violate something like that on your soul, on your conscience. Whereas on a prudential level, we're trying to say, okay, what can we do to actually make a difference? Because I want to make a difference, and I'm going to do something anyway. So what's the best way to go about it, right? So kind of just drawing a distinction between what's moral and prudential there. So real quick, the article kind of makes three important distinctions. I'll highlight them, and then if we want to talk about them anymore, we can. So the first one is a distinction between a material and a formal cooperation. So a material cooperation would be something like, I give somebody a gun and they go commit a homicide. But I didn't know they were going to commit a homicide. I sold them the gun, and for all I knew, they were a law-abiding citizen, etc. Cooperated in the act. Whereas formal cooperation would be, I knew they were going to commit a homicide, and I aided in that. Now, it should be obvious that the formal cooperation there is the really big problem, right? So if in any way that you might formally cooperate in an act where you know by providing the means for that act that you are assisting in it, obviously that is morally wrong. You can't be doing something like that. So you can apply that to any number of social issues where if you're providing the means with the intent of a certain immoral act happening, then you are morally responsible and culpable. The next one was immediate versus mediate. And the idea here in immediate versus mediate is you either provide the means immediately, like I give somebody a gun, or I provide the means, that would be immediately, right? So I immediately give them the means I pay them, and then they use that money to go buy a gun. Again, you can kind of probably figure out which one is worse, right? If I give them the gun directly to perform a moral act, then I have a higher degree of moral responsibility and culpability, rather than, especially if I just paid them for an act of plumbing and I had no idea that they're going to go do that, right? And then the last one is proximate versus remote. Like, how close are you to the immoral act itself? And the example here is you go to a hamburger chain and you give them the money, and they collect their revenues, they pay their employees, and somewhere down the chain they donate to Planned Parenthood. Okay, not great, but you maybe you didn't know, but you're very distant from the act itself. So that would be remote, whereas proximate would be like Planned Parenthood has a cookout, a barbecue. God help us. And you go there and you buy, knowing that your money is directly going to the cause. Planned Parenthood has a cookout, a barbecue. God help us. And you go there and you buy, knowing that your money is directly going to the cause. And that's obviously worse, right? That's something
that reminds me of a news story not too long ago from a small brewery in Washington, D.C. that it specifically brewed a beer for sale, and all proceeds went to Planned Parenthood, and it had a very disgusting name, very, very pro-abortion name to it that was unfortunate.
So that would obviously be a clearly immoral act.
Yeah.
Like, that would be something where you have an absolute moral obligation to boycott that. And
could be the best beer in the world.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how good the beer is, doesn't matter how many of your friends are going. If you know that you are proximately providing the means for a gravely immoral act, then
so that's on the moral level, but then when we get down to actually living a moral life, how do we do that without incurring great cost to ourselves or great inconvenience to ourselves? Where does it matter? That changes. Yeah.
So the first thing everybody has to do is they should memorize. These are just good moral principles in general for any life decision. So you should familiarize yourself with that.
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, and the church teaches this, and this follows from traditional natural law, and so it helps you to navigate a world of tough decisions, having these distinctions and principles. So that's the first thing. Get some type of understanding of these. Because certain things we do have various degrees of moral responsibility, meaning you contribute to an act in some way, you're responsible for it. But then there's also moral culpability, meaning that you can be held guilty for it. Right? So another quick distinction, somebody can be responsible for an act, culpability, meaning that you can be held guilty for it. Right? So another quick distinction, somebody can be responsible for an act where it's their fault that the act happened, but you might not hold them guilty or accountable for it. So an example of that would be something like somebody kills somebody, but they were schizophrenic or something. They had a mental disorder or disease, so they weren't And the church is very clear on this, and they always have been, in terms of, just not to get too far aside, but I just had a conversation with this friend the other day, when we're talking especially about like mortal sin, like the kinds of stuff that can eternally separate you from God. It has to be grave matter, like homicide or something like that, right? But then you also have to have sufficient knowledge. You have to know what you're doing, and this is where moral culpability comes in. So grave matter is you've done something that you're responsible for that is a really, really bad act, right? And then you had sufficient liable to be held guilty for it and accountable. And then the last one is full consent of the will, right? You weren't coerced. You weren't under some type of condition, medical condition, or what have you. So those are just other important moral distinctions: responsibility on one hand, culpability on another. So back to the topic at hand.
Yeah.
Right. So if somebody like puts a gun to the back of your head and like, hey, we're going to that Planned Parenthood barbecue, and you contribute to it, like, you're responsible, but you're not culpable.
Yeah.
Right.
Slight distinction.
Which, with the way they operate, that might not be unheard of.
So a few months ago, we talked about maybe doing this episode anyways, because you and I were listening to a Catholic radio program, and it was I think just a movie reviews, quick segment on movie reviews. And it must have been around the same time as Disney saying that they were going to boycott. It must have been around the same time as Disney saying that they were going to boycott Georgia for the heartbeat bill. Remember, the heartbeat bill was, or is, a law now in Georgia where as soon as you can detect a fetal heartbeat, then you can no longer abort that fetus, which is around 6 weeks. So it really, I mean, it almost makes it impossible to get an abortion. So a movie must have made Lion King. Some Disney movie had come out at the same time, and you had this movie critic talking about what movies are worth seeing. And the host of the show asked, well, should you boycott? And the answer that he gave, neither of us were satisfied with, because he likened going to spend money on a Disney movie to not buying Colgate toothpaste or something like that.
Yeah.
And there's a large distinction as well between recreation and necessity.
That's right.
So we can talk a little bit about that as well if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you pointed it out well. Is the Lion King to stop them from getting cavities filled. In fact, seeing the Lion King might lead to you needing to get cavities filled, depending on what your favorite treat of the day is. I know Twizzlers is yours.
Yep. And Mike Mike's.
Yeah. Now I don't know if Twizzlers is contributing to any.
Well, that's the thing. So if you go and if you look, I can't remember what the website is. Family Council, maybe. I could be butchering that name, but if you go and look. Companies that Christians should boycott. The list is enormous.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are conglomerates like Johnson & Johnson, which owns a gazillion subsidiaries.
Yeah,
and you're never going to be able to boycott everything. And most likely you don't even know why you're boycotting.
Yep.
Because you're not going to buy whatever Palmolive soap because way up the food chain they're donating something.
Yeah. So I would say on a prudential level when it comes to something like this, yeah, absolutely, right? When it comes to like Disney and Netflix, these companies that are flamboyantly, like let's get a full-on boycott going there. But there's also power in numbers and groups. So if there's a cultural opportunity where Christians, Catholics, or just pro-life activists, there's a lot in the pro-life, and we're using pro-life as an example here, but take any cause you want that falls in line with church teaching that, is culturally problematic right now, which, let's be frank, is pretty much everything, right? But if there's an opportunity where you can really rally together with other people and make a bigger difference because you have the numbers.
Be that squeaky wheel.
Yeah, that's right. Like, then it really makes sense. And we have our favorite train about to pass by, so pardon any
freight training
sounds.
It's
going the other way, so we're okay. It's not going to blow its horn. If it does, it's getting boycotted.
We don't even
and
know
a letter written, and they're going to get a letter.
We know the name of the company. We do not know what they freight around.
So yeah, that's a prudential thing. And like, okay, you might be like, well, I'm going to boycott this particular brand of toothpaste, and you're going to lose this, multi-billion-dollar You might be like, well, I'm going to boycott this particular brand of toothpaste, and you're going to lose this, multi-billion-dollar conglomeration, like what, $2.50 over 6 months. Honestly, is it gonna? And then now you have to go out of your way and buy like a $6 jug of toothpaste from somewhere else. So these are prudential considerations. Prudential meaning using practical wisdom, what is going to make the biggest difference. And and especially when it comes to big cultural influencers like Netflix and Disney, they are out on the front lines of culture, really trying to change opinion. So it makes more sense to battle to be the David against these horrendous Goliaths than to just try and nitpick. A lot of these companies, like you say, you kind of have to go digging. They're kind of silent for it.
And so a lot of times, too, in corporations, they will do a corporate matching program. So if an employee says, I'll donate 5% of my paycheck to such and such that you don't agree with, might be on that list. And so because of their...
But it's not corporate culture at large.
It's not. So I would imagine that a lot of the companies on that list, as far as, because I looked into a lot, some of them, then there's a big difference between do they actively give money to, say, Planned Parenthood versus letting their employees do that, and because of their corporate policy, they have to as well.
Yeah, so there's a big difference there as well, where you just kind of have a very general, vague corporate donation policy, and it's more the employees who are affecting that. Now, one wishes we were in a culture where donations to Planned Parenthood weren't even possible. One wishes we were in a culture where Planned Parenthood didn't even exist.
But well, I would say, too, a lot of times, and you really can't blame the corporation. I mean, you can blame the corporation. But, again, I worked in a large corporate retail setting. And anybody, you could get any corporation or any foundation, organization approved by the company by just submitting some paperwork. Mm-hmm. So you could have any foundation, organization approved by the company by just submitting some paperwork. Mm-hmm. So you could have two people in the whole company want to donate money to Planned Parenthood. They submit the paperwork. It's a legitimate organization. Yeah. The corporation mm-hmm. is just paperwork for them.
Yeah. So, not say that they're off the hook, but again, like we got to learn to pick our battles because there's only so much time, energy, and money that we can withhold and all that. So the point that I think we're both trying to make here is that let's look at these cultural giants that are absolutely flagrant about their abortion advocacy, and let's rally together like people have and be very clear that there's going to be a significant penalty for people who champion what really is the worst Holocaust in human history. And then like when it comes right down to it, let's be the Disney is just not what it used to be. It's making garbage films. Your life can only be better by not seeing the latest iteration of The Lion King. And say what you want about Disney, absolutely that's the case with Netflix. I mean, come on. Just on a prudential level, I would say there's a case to be made from canceling Netflix just by the fact that there's so many, and like I'm not saying that it's bad to watch TV or movies. We watch TV, movies, we love it too. But the amount of time that people spend binge watching utter garbage on Netflix, intellectual garbage, moral garbage, that you could spend doing anything else. Like forget like the religious devotions or your intellectual studies. Certainly great alternatives there, right? Deepening your prayer life, spending more time with your families, reading or rereading great books. But how about like learning a musical instrument, like crafts, like anything, versus the amount of time people spend on Netflix. So just on the level of personal development, I would say please, God in heaven, cancel Netflix. And then also know that you'll be doing a good cause there as well as not contributing to a corporation that just is advocating pure evil.
A few months ago when I started that Netflix boycott petition on, I think it was change.org, a lot of people had reached out and said that they had already canceled Netflix simply because of the content was so anti-Christian, so racist, so bigoted that they couldn't stand it anyway, so they got rid of it. So you're not really, you like a show, oh, whoop-de-doo. The shows come and go. It's going to end after a few seasons. What does it matter?
And so is life.
And so is life.
and then there's gonna be some some questions.
Oh, you know what? I saw a really good cartoon, and it was just, it's not even a cartoon. It was a picture, a drawing of a priest offering mass. And you see, anyway, it says, "Why, if you don't want to go to mass, why do you think you want to go to heaven?" Mm-hmm. I thought that was a good one.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, right? I mean, and this is what's so right and beautiful about the Catholic Church is right. We have this thing called works, and the idea of works is it's our response to God's grace. It's our cooperation with God's grace. God wants to turn us inside out. He wants to make us into saints. He wants to have us become the type of being that we were meant to be, so we can enjoy eternal friendship with him in heaven. And, that requires our free cooperation with the gifts that God has given us to grow in holiness, to grow in love, in mercy, in compassion, in patience, in temperance, in fortitude, in justice. And
you're
all
not going to
things.
get that binge watching,
like the Bad Boys on Netflix or whatever that garbage show is, right? So, I mean, you're at the very least forestalling your moral and spiritual development, and possibly even eroding it by watching these shows that are adamantly, if not like directly, at least implicitly anti-Christian, and just promoting immoral behavior riddled with all kinds of temptations. So on those grounds alone, there's a strong case to be made for just cleaning up that aspect, and that's something we had to do. Right, we used to watch a lot more TV and garbage before becoming Catholic. And now we watch a lot more EWTN. So there you go. Like there's stuff you can watch that I like, and I would never have guessed 4 or 5 years ago that you would have told me that I would have enjoyed watching something like EWTN. That I love it. Christine even makes fun of me for how much I love watching EWTN. like there's great shows. I know you love it too. There's great shows, great guests, exciting topics, segments for everyone. Is it as exciting as the new Terminator movie that's going to come out? Probably not in some ways. But we all like watching stuff. There's value to be had in that. So. And we're not saying that you never see any movies or watch any shows ever, but as a general, prudential strategy, at the very least, we can hit that cancel button on Netflix, and I can only see life drastically improving from there. Bless you.
Thanks. That was a cough. So we talked about Netflix and Disney. I mean, they are very flagrant offenders of what we should be striving towards as Catholics, with their very flagrant and public opinions on the pro-life thing. But it's easy if you want to go and search for that company list of all the companies that Christians should boycott. I mean, it's hundreds of companies. But if you just scroll through that list and be like, you know what, I just heard this company in the news for something like this. It might help remind you.
Yeah.
So I can't think of what it's called now, but right now these if you're going to say we're just boycotting abortions. Now these if you're going to say we're just boycotting abortion stuff. And there's plenty of other things to talk about as well. And we'll touch briefly on those before the episode ends.
It's the world's most fun episode.
I know.
Here's a list of a bunch of stuff you have to quit.
Have fun.
Please subscribe. Consider leaving 5 stars.
We're all about fun here.
We'll make the next episode a lot more jovial. I promise.
Okay. Well,
as I invite myself back onto your podcast.
Whoa. A bunch of musicians. People are making it easy to figure out what you should avoid. So a bunch of musicians, if you can call them that, all banded together and say that they stand with Planned Parenthood against, since Planned Parenthood said that they wouldn't stop doing abortions or referring to abortions.
Taylor Swift and all that. Yeah, if you just follow Taylor Swift and just anything that she says, just the opposite. There is a good.
But you wouldn't. There's some other things that you might be surprised, like the lead singer from Heart or something was on the 9 Inch Nails, whatever. So I
Trent
think
Reznor, what a disappointment.
I know. So there was a couple on there that I thought Third Eye Blind, maybe. I could be wrong about that. Mm-hmm. So there's just like this list of most of them. I'm too old and don't care about these artists. But there's a big, they just put a big list out. Great. Then you know to avoid those people because they are actively promoting abortion.
That's right. And,
it makes it easy.
Anything to cling on to whatever last possible shred of relevance they have too for some of these people. It's really quite sad and pathetic. And we know that that's how the kind of liberal elite Hollywood culture works. There's been enough people blacklisted from that for having religious or conservative views that, if you want to be in the club, you got to
you pay to pay with your morals.
You got to pay to play exactly with your morals. You got to dance the ridiculous dance. So they need our cultural support to show that we're going to stand for this. And, and then despite I think of Mario Lopez, who got mobbed the other day for saying the very obvious fact that men are men and women are women. Or who else is? It's sad that you have to find the very few. Somebody once said you can know the conservatives in Hollywood because they're just the ones you never hear about. They just stay kind of quiet. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish they would actually speak up a lot more often. But when they do, like when somebody says that men are men and women are women, and they get mobbed and threatened to I don't know if it actually happened, but I know he got his position threatened and all this. I
think he apologized.
Cancel culture. Yeah, never apologize. Never apologize. For one, here, not to get on too much of a rant, right? First off, you're speaking the truth, right? So if you're apologizing and then you're like admitting that like a man could be, then you're lying, and lying incurs moral guilt. So then you're lying, and lying incurs moral guilt. So it is wrong to lie. It is a sin to lie. So,
and it doesn't mean that you have to be rude about it. So a couple of years ago, remember you got mobbed online because of a kettlebell workout name.
That's right.
It was a kettlebell. It's an exercise called a man maker. Mm-hmm. It's just what the exercise is called. Well, you got mobbed, like one or two people online just started making a lot of noise.
Yep.
And you'll see in culture, usually on social media, it's like, whoa, I didn't mean it like that. You're right. Maybe we should look at a different name for this exercise. That would be what would typically happen.
Yep.
And then they would get their way. And then they keep making noise and being pushy. They're bullies. Mm-hmm. And you just said no.
Yeah, I just told them to go away.
And they did.
Politely at first. But that's what you have to do, right? Is that you have to understand the mentality of these people. They are not morally virtuous. They just aren't. They are bullies. They are who they think they can mob. So that's the other thing. You always notice they never act alone. They always like rally their mob, and they try and mob and create social pressure. And so the idea there is one, never lie, stay firm in the truth, understand that their tactics are predictable as a horde of rats. They will always mob, but if you don't back down, you don't apologize, and especially you shouldn't, because on issues like things like this, you're right. You're right. They will eventually, like any bully, realize it's not worth the time, and then they will go away. But as soon as you apologize or back down, they don't want your apology. They want your head, and then they'll use you as an example, and they'll parade around, and that will encourage them to continue on this babyish behavior even more. So that was what was very disappointing about Mario Lopez. I love how much he talks about his Catholic faith or this or that, but it's like, come on, man. First off, look, we're all in a very comfortable culture at this time, and this or that. That, like, you look back to like all the Catholic saints and martyrs, and the fact that they would this or that. That, like, you look back to like all the Catholic saints and martyrs, and the fact that they would, like Saint Irenaeus saying that the jaws of the lion were my gateway to heaven. Like, talk about not backing down, not renouncing or repudiating any like ounce or shred or inch of the faith in the face of death. Like that is conviction. That is faith. That is cooperating fully with God's grace. And now we have people that, because they don't want to get picked on online, will go to ridiculous heights of saying that like there's no difference between men or women. So how far we have come. Yeah. But that's just a total aside. Don't apologize for speaking the truth. You're correct. Don't apologize for holding what is obviously the moral position. And that's really it. That's all you have to do. And then these people will go and try and find some weaker victim to prey upon. Mm-hmm.
So speaking of how comfortable we are now as in our culture, a company can make it quite uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So especially, say you have children who are putting the pressure on you to go see the latest Disney movie because they want to be able to talk about it with their friends, or all their friends are seeing it. That can be difficult, but that is where it's very important to know your reasons of why you're boycotting and be able to explain it, because kids will understand. Mm-hmm. I even had to explain recently to our almost 6-year-old why we can't watch Netflix anymore, because they go over to Pop-Ups. And actually, they even took it one step further, which is fine by me. Their grandfather has Netflix on his TV, and they tell him that he needs to get rid of Netflix and they can't watch it.
Good job, Mira.
Yeah. That's the same child who goes around asking everybody if they're Catholic.
Yeah, she's going to be quite the evangelist. We hope. We hope and pray.
But it does make life more difficult. I have boycotted Target for about 2 or 3 years now because of their transgender policies. And that makes it incredible. Boycotted Target for about 2 or 3 years now because of their transgender policies. And that makes it incredibly difficult. I wound up shopping there maybe twice in the past couple of years, just out of pure necessity. Mm-hmm. There was nothing else. and that's difficult because I like Target. I like the wander. How many moms like to just wander through Target? It's a nice experience,
but at the same time, why shouldn't it be? What type of the Catholic Christian life? What part of moral development isn't difficult? Christ said, "Pick up your cross and follow me." As they hated me, he gave us all the right expectations. They will hate you as well. He told us that we would, and he was absolutely right, that we should expect to be shunned, shamed, persecuted, mocked, all these various things. And when it comes to any aspect of the moral life, temperance, fortitude, justice, patience, these are all difficult things. And that's part of one of my favorite parts of Scripture is St. Paul's thorn in his side, where and nobody knows exactly what it is, but I think that's purposeful, so we can all kind of relate to St. Paul from our own perspective, where he's got this thorn in his side. He's asked God to remove it. God said, "No, my grace is sufficient for you." So in our trials, there is always, and the priest made a great point of this last night. In every trial of life, there is always opportunities for grace, for gifts, or for blessings, for growing in holiness. I just think that, yes, it is difficult, but if we come with the perspective, in light of the great Catholic tradition, that this is just living our faith, and that in periods of difficulty, in trials with the culture at large and everything we're facing, we have these opportunities to grow deeper in holiness, and to bind ourselves more closely to God, to receive more of God's grace. That should get us excited. We should look at that in a much different light, rather than looking at it and saying "Oh man," okay, here's an opportunity for me to really grow in my faith and to offer something up to God and to Christ. And I think it just puts a whole different perspective, and it can really fortify you in that way.
Well, yeah, and speaking of what we can give up or give to God, I mean, as silly as it might be, the fact that I'm not shopping at Target, and I've also gotten rid of Pinterest because of their flagrant censoring of the pro-life movement and Christians on their site. I no longer use Pinterest, and I don't shop at Target. That has made me spend less money, and it's also made me spend less time just scrolling mindlessly through social media. Both wins.
Yes.
So as difficult as it may be when I'm trying to figure out some kind of craft or what to make for dinner, where I usually would go to Pinterest, or blow off some steam, or be able to buy items from 5 different departments at Target, it has helped me rethink what I actually need to buy, what I need to be spending my time on. So it's been a gift, even though it's been a difficulty.
And I guess the last point that I'll make, unless you have any other ideas, is every little bit matters. And be willing, strengthen numbers again. So sign the petitions. Share the stuff on social media. That's such a big thing.
And right? Social makes it so easy.
It does, because so many people, because of these mobs that we just talked about, are afraid to speak up. But when they see somebody else do it, it energizes them. It rallies the troops on our side, and to get Netflix to stop, to step out of these snares of Satan. Sign it and share it. These little things of just building that cultural and social momentum can go a really long way, and that's you'll probably hear it, but so what? There's always going to be people who are going to be upset by it. But what's the alternative? What's the alternative? You don't do anything, and then it keeps encroaching and encroaching and encroaching until, guess what? That's it. It's too late. So I mean, that's it. There is no alternative. We have to be willing to stand firm in our faith, for the values and morals that we believe, and we have to be willing to roll up our sleeves, spit on our hands, and get in the thick of things. Mm-hmm.
Well said.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I combaration. What was the word?
Cumberations.
Combaration. What was the word?
Cumberations.
We cleaned up a little as I had my coffee, and
you woke it up a little bit. It's because you had a little ice cream last night. Your brain's not working.
Ice cream, and we indulged in some very nice Gnocchi, you said? Pronounced
Gnocchi.
Gnocchi, yeah. I was pronouncing it gnocchi or something. Very good, yeah. So body is full of inflammation.
The brain isn't working. Well, so I hope this helps clear up, that there is a real point to boycotting. You should do it in certain situations. I think we've laid out where it's appropriate and where it's just onerous for you and unnecessary. Mm-hmm. And can also, if you are, one last one. I know Target is very forthright with their very liberal social justice policies. And then you have something like Walmart on the other end where you also see calls for boycotting because they sell a couple hundred satanic products online. Mm-hmm. That's a problem. They shouldn't be doing that. Or the fact that Etsy will sell consecrated hosts for black magic. Well, that's really bad too. Yeah, this is bad.
Jeez, yeah.
If you have something that's just a company that's letting something go because of policy versus another company that's actively pursuing and trying to change the culture,
yes,
there is a difference there. So just think about. Again, you can go and look at that search for a list of what companies Christians should boycott. If you've seen it in the news lately and you know that they make a big stink about things that are anti-Catholic, then maybe start there.
Yes. And
just, you don't have to do them all at once, but just start chipping away little by little. And we don't boycott that much.
Yeah, you just have to reshuffle a few habits, at least starting out.
Reshuffling a few habits. This is not suddenly, living in a recycled box with your Chick-fil-A.
But last thing, last thing, the final, a farewell concert here. When priorities are priorities, right? Boycotting, spreading the Christian life through your consumer actions, important. But your prayer life, receiving the sacraments, going to Mass. Let's make sure these things are all solid as well. Sometimes people can get caught up in the political battles that they forget to come home.
It's a total
to Jesus,
package,
right?
Yeah, it's a total package.
Get to Mass, pray, right? Nothing never underestimate the power of prayer.
Yeah,
pray for the utter removal of Planned Parenthood. Pray for the people who are working at Planned Parenthood that they have a change of heart. We've seen it happen significantly a number of times. Pray for changes in culture. Receive the sacrament. Strengthen yourself spiritually as well.
Right. Interior and exterior work to be done. All right. Well, thanks for listening to this episode of The Catholic Mama. If you like what you hear, please leave a very nice, glowing, beautiful review. It helps spread this little ministry across the internet. And if you like these episodes and don't want to miss them, because they come out usually about once a week, and then Catechism Fridays, usually on Fridays, although sometimes on a Saturday morning, please subscribe. And then
we hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.